Hello and welcome back to the Ad-Based Podcast. I'm your host, Fayola Douglas, and I'm joined by Adam Azor. Adam is the EVP Global Marketing for Sportradar, the world's leading sport technology company, overseeing the global marketing team. Prior to joining Sportradar, he held senior marketing and leadership roles for leading agencies such as B&B and Jack Morton. Adam has led campaigns and marketing strategy for global brands including Microsoft, Molson Coors, Sony and Coca-Cola. As a multi-award-winning marketer, he's had a diverse career across a range of marketing disciplines, from advertising and digital through to events, product marketing, covering both B2C and B2B businesses. Welcome, Adam.
Thank you very much, Fiona. It's great to be here, and it's a real honour and a privilege to join this podcast. I said to you I was a fan, so really excited to have the conversation today.
Yeah, excited to have you here. I'm really excited that it's also on video as well. I'm moving into a bit of a new era myself, so it's great to have so many great guests lined up, including yourself.
Well, very happy to be part of this new era.
So we're going to start at the very beginning of your career and we'll work our way through. So we're going back quite far here now into your education. So you're going to have to, run back the clock, remember back to those days. So you studied public relations and marketing at the University of Lincoln. Did you know back then what you wanted to go on to do? It's quite a specific degree that you chose, really.
Yeah, I was thinking about this I have a distinct memory going back to my school days, and I'm not sure if it was the same for you, but do you remember those early career meetings when you were at sort of secondary school, and probably around 13, 14, where they kind of go through all the different career options? I remember this being, in my area, there was a big book that you could look through. And then you would go there, say what your interests are, and they kind of like give you different scenarios, and it was as you kind of worked into work experience. That was as you started going out at that age. I have a distinct memory of walking in and telling them that I wanted to work not just in PR, but for a PR agency. But here's the thing, I have the distinct memory of saying that. I don't know how and where initially I got that idea, but I remember that was it.
Did you have friends, family, parents, or anything that worked in the area? No.
Not at all. And that's the thing I honestly can't remember, and I don't know it, but I have the distinct memory of that. Now, I didn't do at that age just work experience at a local firm, but not even a PR firm. I think it was a recruitment firm, and I did my first ever work experience. But that thought stayed with me because I knew where I wanted to go career-wise, literally from that age. And then a funny story, I was about 16, 17 at college, sixth form college after school. I remember being in the student union area, and there was a poster on the wall for a BBC TV show, and it was a TV show called Hot Pursuits. So I describe it as Pop Idol for students, and basically you had to say which career you wanted to work in and why, and then you basically get picked as that person. You go off and do work experience film by the BBC. And I went and I saw this and I applied. I said I wanted to work in PR. Now, I don't repeat this too often, but this is the truth. On my application, I said I wanted to be the new Max Clifford. Let me be clear, this was before any allegations that came to mind what Max Clifford was really like. But I think my pitch was I wanted to be as well known and famous as Max Clifford at that era, to take away any of the other areas of that. And that was my pitch, because I thought, right, if I'm going to go work in PR, you need a soundbite. And yeah, I went for an interview and I got selected, and they basically filmed one person from a range of different careers. And I went off and I worked at an agency, I think it's still around today, called Conan Wolf.
So were they filming you while you were doing this
work experience? Yeah, I went over, so the way the format of the show was, is I went over to London. I've obviously born and raised in Southampton. So I went to London, I was working in this PR agency. I remember, this is going to age me, but I was working on Coca-Cola. That was my first time I worked on Coke. But I worked on the video launch of Saving Private Ryan in Germany, and the PR campaign around that. That was one of my big memories. And I tell you how good the PR agency was, is they were very selective of what they let the BBC film when we were going into the creative phase of that launch, I would say, as well. So I got a good insight, which reinforced my desire to go and work certainly in that world. So yeah, that was it. I went back, and then you go back to the show, you say, do you want to work in that career? And then I applied for university and I studied PR and marketing.
You're already a step ahead of everybody else having that work experience going into
Yeah.
your studies. Yeah.
It was really useful in terms of at least understanding the dynamics of an agency. Because again, you don't really understand at that time client agency dynamics, and to be honest, you don't really understand the nuances between PR, marketing, advertising, the different types of agencies. And if I'm being brutally honest, I probably thought incorrectly PR was the creative campaign orientated side more than what the role of sort of an ad agency or an integrated agency was at that era. Yeah, so studying marketing, advertising was, something I was always looking to do. It was something that got me from a very young age, and I was good at it. Like, that was one of the things my skill set just was naturally suited to that world.
So when you were doing your studies, did that then open things up further for you in terms of seeing that maybe marketing was more the route that you wanted to take rather than just sticking to PR?
Yes, I think as I went through the academic studies, I had a bigger understanding, because you work on the different disciplines. You work on, even at that era, it was print, direct marketing, events. You're understanding some of the differences between it, and then obviously I was starting to then have more practical experience of what that actually meant. I was still, at that time, I still didn't know which direction, but I knew I wanted to go into the agency world. So I think that was very much, and I found that era of university is a really interesting period of time, right? In the fact that I was very lucky that I had a clear focus on what I wanted to do post-university and the career I went in, and I found that the course and the qualification that I did was useful. And even now, some of the things you go on leadership training courses or do different academic things later in your career, and some of those foundational models and areas are still the same ones that I was taught academically, whether that's Porter's 5 Forces or some of the communication models. We still think and talk about that, still relevant even in today's crazy, very different world. But there's also a question about what area of the industry you go in and whether that is. If you're not doing, let's say, a degree which is so specific, there is questions about then how useful it is in the context of this industry now, in the modern industry, definitely.
So it sounds like you already knew what you wanted to do from quite a young age, but were there ever any other interests that kind of turned your head, something else that you think you could have gone on to do? Maybe it's something that is like one of your personal passions or even relates to your role today. Like, was sport a big thing for you back then at all? Or?
Sport as a fan, I've always been a football fan, and Southampton is my team, so I'm a suffering sports fan. The only thing which kind of also interested, the only other thing that was floating around, and my wife says because she studied law, and she says to me, if you hadn't gone in the career you've gone, you would have been a good lawyer. And that's the only other area which, again, there's similarities, firm, clients, agencies. I could certainly see part of that, but I do remember one of my modules that I studied was law, and it was probably one of the ones I least enjoyed. So I may have enjoyed, and I think I potentially would have enjoyed the career in law, but I certainly don't think I would have enjoyed the studies to get there.
After university, thinking about those early days of your career, you had some great qualifications under your belt, but how did you go about getting your foot in the door? Well, you already had this one bit of work experience. Did you get more while you were at university? And then how did you get that first role?
So, one other thing I was doing during university, and this I still stand by as probably how I got my first job, is I set up and ran essentially a promotions company during university. So that was like my part-time job. There was another guy who also works in industry, Ben Fishlock, who we went to college together in Southampton. And I'm from an era where sort of UK garage, R&B, hip-hop was a big passion of mine, and I went up to university in Lincoln. And there wasn't a lot of urban music around at that era, so we kind of, I actually went to school with Craig David. That's showing my age. We were in the same class, and that era of R&B, hip-hop, garage, we took and started running nights and club promotions, and then we actually branched out into different genres. And I set up a company with Ben. It was called Incognito Events, and we basically did a lot of nightclub promotion, running multiple areas. I did under 18s events, we did different genres of music, we did student nights, and I actually wrote my dissertation on that. On the company I set up, because we were booking artists from Ministry of Sound and like all the big sort of major garage DJs of the time.
It
And
sounds like it wasn't just a little thing. This sounds like a big thing.
it was a thing. You know what's really fun? I was thinking about this. So
Moment.
it had its moment, and here's the thing. I'm going to say again another funny story. So I set up the company with Ben. We were partners. Ben was really interested in the business side of it. He was also studying marketing. He studied marketing advertising. There was a selection of us in our friendship group who were all involved, either via DJing or helping us promote and run the nights. Out of these people, so I myself went in and worked agency in marketing. Ben went off and he's still working in the industry. He was working at Global. He's now business development director at Global Street Art. Two of our DJs, one of them, Nathan Cook, became senior director at Unilever. He runs advertising innovation. I think he's now brand experience director. He was agency, went client side. Glenn Payton, who was also working for us, he's now managing partner at Legolas Delaney. And the only guy, one of our other residents who worked in for us, he's the only one, but he ended up becoming COO of Barclays in Asia Pacific. And there was another guy who worked for us. I think he's now working for Football Co. is their PR manager. He was another one of our DJs. That was the group. We were all students enjoying the music, and we all, you know, I say that you learn a lot of practical experience, and it's quite funny how we've all actually gone off and worked in similar parts of the industry, or he's crossed over at different paths, different areas as well. And a lot of one of my guys who actually designed the logos and the brand identity, I forget, is a childhood friend of mine called Martin Walker, who ended up becoming a creative director, worked at BBH, he's still in the industry now. So there's a load of people from that era who we kind of got those skills, and the reason I say that story is that is really what was my USP when I was going for that first job. Because in that era, it was still very difficult to get that first job. I remember Ben, who works in the company with me, he applied for the Ogilvy graduate scheme. I remember this in between, like it was a summer placement between one of our years of university, and they were taking out, I think they were taking on 100 people over that placement, so they're looking to interview 100. In classic Ben, so Ben didn't make the shortlist. They told him he didn't make the shortlist, so he managed to get hold of a phone number and left a phone call and ended up getting on the course. They made an exception and made him the 101, ended up getting the placement. But I remember him coming back in saying at that era, you know, it was very still Oxbridge. It was very, you know, the type of people that were going to the industry, especially the advertising side, you know, there was a certain type of candidate who was making that transition. It was a very difficult industry to break into. And I found that, you know, when you then went in, it wasn't around. So the question was, what have you done? What's making you stand out? And it was tough to get that first role. But the thing that really hooked someone's attention wasn't necessarily I was talking about my academic and my passion. It was like, well, this is what I've done. This is what I did university. I did this, and this is what I learned, and it's how practical. And that was really the sort of the step up part of it. That kind of got me in that first position. That's how I got my foot in the door. First agency was an agency called Mediator, and I worked on. Do you remember Wanadu, which became Orange? It was the ISP provider. And that was my first ever account for an agency called Mediator. It was a partnership marketing agency.
And so was it a decision made by you that you wanted to go into marketing, or was it just a case of you looking at what was out there and then that just was a natural fit? Like, were you trying to get into the PR roles, or did you just...
I was looking at all roles across that. I mean, I was looking at PR agencies, ad agencies, marketing agencies. I was looking at anyone in that world, and it was difficult just to get an interview at that stage. And so again, there was no tech platforms. It wasn't the vast options that you have. It was such a desirable career, right? Because it's creative, it's for the young people, you get to party, you can make a good career, you can get paid well. So it was a really attractive career for people to get into. So the demand of that era to get into it was tough. So I was looking in, but then, you know, once I think this was one of the first interviews, face-to-face interviews I had. And I tell you, again, aging myself, I remember it, that my face-to-face interview was it was the day of the London bombings. You remember when it was the day when the explosions went off in the underground? And I was coming into London. I was on the train because I was coming up from Southampton, and they were phoning me and they were saying, just so you know, you don't have to come to your interview. And I just said, no, I'm on train now. And by the way, just so you know, I'm putting my life on the line for this interview. So let's make sure it goes well, in a joking way. And I think that also cut me out. So again, like standing out in that era, but that was when I did my interview, and I got the role from that. And that was a really interesting. Yeah, you learn a lot in your first role and your bosses that you work with in that era. And actually, I would say, honestly, I learned there was a really good boss who came in halfway who I really vibed with and got a really... Initially, I wasn't learning. I actually learnt more from my clients. The clients I had a really good set of clients, and that can also make and break when your agency side, your initial client interactions. And those Dominic Nichols and Gavin Rendasham, my two client contacts. I remember them really well, and we just connected, and they were actually giving me advice, having worked with agencies, what to think about and how to go onto it. So yeah, that was a really interesting foundational period. So yeah, I was there just over a year. That was my first agency role.
So the landscape is obviously quite a bit different now, but do you have any advice for others who are starting out? Maybe they're finishing university, or maybe they're just about to start, like what they should be doing. It sounds like I hear again and again that like getting that early work experience is like one of the best things to do, but do you have any other advice?
Yeah, I 100% agree on the work experience. Like that is a really important thing to do. But I'd say in addition to the work experience, is there things you can do that make you stand out? So is that society-led? For me, obviously, we created a company and we were doing that. That was something that made us stand out. There was other people that made short films or projects depending on their courses and things, and they did interesting things. It's what is it that is going to make you cut through and stand out, and especially in the industry of marketing and advertising, if you haven't got the innate ability to stand out, cut out, you probably ain't going into the right industry anyway if you're going in that area. So I would say anything you can do to help you additional to just your academic qualifications or non-academic qualifications, that's another topic we can maybe get into around it as well. But what is it that's going to help you stand out?
So in those early days as well, you moved on to become group account director at BD Network, working with a range of amazing clients. How did you go about securing that role?
BD. So I always smile and think very fondly about BD Network. So I actually joined as an account manager. So one of my good friends from university, Glenn Payton, he was at Mother at the time in the biscuit, so part of the T building where BD
sounds
is.
Like you have a great network. To be honest. It sounds like you've got like a packed black book of like all amazing.
Yeah, it's a good bunch of good contacts around there, and he was one who was telling me about BD because I think they were doing some work with BD and it was in the T building. It's quite cool. So they're on my radar, and I was chatting to a few people about them, but the opportunity never came up. And I went to, after I left Mediator, I went to Claydon Healy. Claydon Healy Jones, Mason, which was more of a direct type agency. And then I got a phone call from the headhunter who placed me and said, look, I know you're really interested in BD. There's an opportunity coming up was the InBev account, so the alcohol account, around Stella Artois, Leffe and Hoegaarden. And I was like, I've only just kind of got into Claydon Healy, but I was really interested in the agency. And I met them, and that was my first role at BD. I was an account manager. The reason I wanted to go into it was kind of playing in a little bit to my background of working in promotions and nightclubs. I kind of knew that kind of area to a certain degree, at least one aspect of it. So it really interested me. So that was my first role at BD. And I interviewed at the end of 2006. So I joined at the beginning of 2007. It also coincided. So BD Network at that time, we were the classic agency that was an integrated agency from a background of sales promotion. So they became really famous and they had some amazing clients. They're the agency that came up with win a player, buy a player for Coca-Cola. They were the initial agency that worked on Orange Wednesdays and all the fulfillment of that promotion of the film areas. It just won Nintendo and we just won Stella. So it's an agency that was a Scottish agency. The B and the D was set up by Bigot Donald. They were two clients and tenants, and they basically set up, and that's their heritage was alcohol. They did lots of work with Bacardi. And they'd kind of come down from Scotland, got his accounts, and they'd started building it up. It was still a fairly small to medium-sized agency when I joined, but that next sort of 6-7 years was amazing because it also coincided when real digital disruption, social media disruption came in, and it really broke down the silos between the different. And until that point, advertising is very regimented, events very regimented, PR very regimented, direct, and then activation agencies. But what happened is you started to see those barriers. Campaigns weren't as easy to put into those silos. And BD, because they were doing really good work with really good clients, they were able to kind of expand. The first couple of years, for me, I was working on the alcohol brands, and I was working, really enjoying working at a major agency at that point. But the thing that really kind of catapulted me is we pitched and won Molson Coors. Molson Coors at that time, they did something where they consolidated all of their brands into one account. And it was 27 brands. It was... Yeah, it was a big pitch, and I think this was around 2009, 2010-ish, maybe even a tad earlier. And it was like the pitch. Every agency was going after it. And I joined the pitch team, and we pitched and we won that. I was still like a senior account manager, I think, at that time. We won the business, and that account came in, and we resourced it. I think it was meant to be like a top 5 account, maybe number 5 in size and scope, way behind like Coke or Nintendo or Orange at the time. So it was a good resource. We pitched, and I remember we pitched it, and we were all very excited. And then it was kind of quiet. Like the briefs were just kind of, about 1 or 2 briefs kind of filtered in. We were like, what's going on? We thought this is going to be like the big account. And then I'll never forget, we got invited to this briefing day. And they're based in Burton, where some of the best water is in the world, which is why a lot of the beer is brewed there. True story. And we didn't go to their offices. They'd hired out one of their halls in one of their breweries. I thought that's a bit weird. And they'd also allocated a whole day for the briefing. I thought, okay, that's a bit odd. And so the 6 of us, kind of the account team, was there, and a few other people went up. They had basically set up stations all around this hall, and they briefed us. And they briefed us on... We must have picked up 15, 20 briefs, all of multi-million pounds, budgets of activation, everything else. And we were like, okay, this wasn't what we had scoped and won. And quite simply, we knew that this account that we thought was going to be a 6-person account quickly became like a 25-person account, handling only account, just to service it. It became the largest account in the agency within a few months. But the reason I tell that story within BD is that was a really formative period of my career in BD, because it was tough. Because we had resourced it in a certain way, and there was all the deadlines were like overlapping. We brought in freelancers, we were scoping up very quickly, we were trying to build, but we're also having to deliver at the same time. And it was really tough. Like literally, you'd come in at maybe 7, 8 in the morning, you may leave at 10, 11, 12, 4 or 5 times a week. And it did. People who had been there years, it was a very tough, way of doing it. Not everyone could kind of manage that area. And I think for me, I saw that as an opportunity. And it was for me, it was you either kind of sink or swim in those moments. There's a few of us and friends that I'm still in contact with at this time, but I ended up, managing to navigate those waters. I ended up leading that account down the line, as kind of reshaped it. We repitched and won it, and that was really when I went from in a few years I progressed quite rapidly through that. And I also had the opportunity to learn, working on huge brands, big budgets, lots of different disciplines, right at the early days of social media being integrated into marketing. I really enjoyed that time, and the group around it was some of the most talented people that worked in the industry at that collection between 2007 2014 at BD. If you look around the industry right now, there are so many MDs, CEOs, managing partners, executive creative directors that have come through, that were in BD at that time and have gone off, and they're now working in agency. I still bump into them all. I had dinner with one of my good friends, Gary Bonsals. He was the account manager to my senior account manager during that time. We worked together on Molson Coors, and he's now managing partner at VCCP, again working big on a big Alco account. And we talk about the differences, and he took the learnings from that period and he helped shape and grow, which is now one of the largest accounts that they work in as well. But BD was a really special time of my life in terms of what I learned. And the relationships, I probably stayed there too long, probably. I was there 7 years, which in retrospect, I probably stayed there at least 2 years longer than I should have done. And I think it's because I was, becoming a little bit emotionally attached to to the people and the agency around it, especially when you kind of feel good and you're promoting. But
Yeah.
it was a really special time in my career.
And with Molson Coors, was this also something quite different for them and how they were having their accounts managed? Was it previously split between a number of agencies? And so this was a big move for them, putting it all in your hands.
Exactly right. They not only did they have it split across a number of agencies, they also had a number of in-house resources, and that was also a bit sensitive because they restructured because they were doing the in-house design stuff and they had some sort of in-house marketeers around it. So not only had they consolidated into one agency, but they'd also restructured stuff they were doing internally to go externally. So there's also that kind of people and friends and colleagues maybe left that they were working with. So there was always that part, is you're the people that's come into it. So it was a very new way of working, and it was growing pains on. You know what though? It was some of the clients I work with there, and I'm still friendly. One of my close friends now was our Corona client, and that was one of the big accounts and the ones I enjoyed working on the most at BD. I spent a month in Ibiza, Fayola, in my formative years because of Corona, so I had some very happy memories. And Darius Burrows was sort of our main client contact. He was on my stag do of my wedding. Right, we've remained close. He wrote my recommendations for other jobs. So I worked with some really talented, good people, and I think they have a really interesting. Alcohol was a great industry. I also worked on Diageo. As well as Molson. I do like the alcohol industry. There's a good culture in that industry, but it was tough learnings. It was really, really tough, and it was one of the most challenging, but probably one of the most important phases of my career.
Definitely, it sounds like there was some fun to be had, but also it was like long, challenging hours, a lot of work, and a lot of brands to be split across all under one roof.
Yes. And then, the crazy thing, I don't know how we did it, we'd sometimes finish and we were in the heart of Shoreditch, right? So we're in the tea building in the glory years of Shoreditch.
Yeah.
You'd maybe working, you've been in at 7, you maybe finish out at 10, 11. You're straight into Shoreditch House or the Dragon Bar or the Queen of Hoxton, and we would go out, we'd just go meet the team at like 10, 11 o'clock. We'd still go out till 2 in the morning and be back in at 7, 8 the next day. And that was just, it really was that work hard, play hard era. And that was again, right time, right area. I couldn't do that these days, unfortunately.
Yeah, you had the energy then, though.
Yeah.
A different kind of energy. So, obviously, you said that maybe you stayed a little bit too long at BD Network. Why did you decide to make the move? And did you say you were there for 7 years?
7 years. Yeah, 7 years. So, I think when you're at an agency and you've come in at a more junior position, and it's different size and different types of agency, but I come as an account manager, and the nature of the agency is an independent agency, so it was owned by the senior leads. They were board directors and a majority shareholder, but they weren't going anywhere. So you are always progressing, and you are progressing in your career, you're going up in seniority, but the problem is when you get to a certain level, even though the titling's there, there's a glass ceiling. And the other thing I think, you've got nowhere to go. And the other thing around it, I think there is this thing is like you have great relationships, but if someone knows you as you came in as an account manager, there is something in their eyes that, even though you're progressing in that same space, they still think of you in a fond way, but probably as that more entry level, more junior person who's going up, right? And it's not the same with new people join, but the older generation, they see that area around it. So I was kind of a bit conscious of that. And, I have one of my core characters, I'm ruthlessly ambitious and driven. And so, it was getting pretty obvious that, I was emotionally attached to this business, but it was the right time for my career to move on. And I'd had a few opportunities over the sort of the 2-3 years, even had conversations with different agencies, generally through sort of headhunters in that area. And there was nothing that made me want to leave and move. But then it was an opportunity that came up at B&B. And that was a really interesting one. It was the first one that kind of made my head shift. And it's because we were working with them on Molson Coors. They were one of the ad agencies around it. So I got to know some of them, some of the people there as well. And we had a good dynamic with them. So it was a really interesting, and obviously it's Trevor Beatty's agency, right? So there was something very iconic about the heritage, the history of advertising, that it was worth the conversation. And yeah, that was an interesting transition.
Yeah, so how was that change for you? Did it feel very different walking into B&B? I guess you were walking in at a much more senior level. You didn't have that history though with the agency. Was it nice to have that fresh start, or did you
Yeah.
feel like you needed a lot of time to get used to the people, the clients, the culture?
I remember it's probably when I left BD, because I've been an agent, I'd never been in a classic ad agency. And there was two things that was in my mind. Was one, I didn't want to become as emotionally attached to a job in a company like I was at BD, because I thought, going back to when I stayed there, because I was emotionally attached to the people, to the business, rather than necessarily driving my own career. So I was like, right, I'm going to try and keep this more on a professional and do the job. And equally, I don't know how culturally it's going to be. I'm from this BD, which was a Scottish agency. It was a Scottish culture, which I love. We almost came adopted Scots. I was like, how is it going to feel? And I've got to be honest, immediately I felt at home at B&B. They have, and I think they probably still do, they had an amazing culture. And actually it's so similar to BD, and it had none of that. And I think the thing is, they were an agency built in Trevor and Bill's image, and David Bain. The people that shaped it, these were really down to earth avatars. They weren't your classic, old school network ad agent. They were the antithesis of that. Loved it. And the interesting thing at that point, it was a really transformative period for them, because they were your classic ad agency that was driven by advertising retainers, right? And it was very TV, print orientated work at that time. And the big thing for them was they were on a mission for integration. And that's one of the reasons why I joined. So B&B had just acquired another agency called Neon, and Neon had come in and it's expanded their integration. So promotional marketing, content, social media, and events, experiential was coming in to make it a more integrated package. And then the guy who was leading that, I didn't know, a guy called Sam Richardson, really great guy, really great chemistry. He's the one who kind of persuaded me to come in. I didn't know I joined, and then he told me, oh yeah, by the way, I'm leaving next week. You're my exit strategy, which he only told me once I joined, so I never forgive him about that.
Oh, you're looking forward to working with him, and then it was
I was looking at it, and he was like, I had to get a succession plan in, which I didn't tell you, and I'm leaving next week, or like 2 weeks' time. I was like, okay, great. So, but they were going through a period where they had recently sold to Chale. They were still B&B, but becoming part of the Chale network. Understanding how that worked, and they'd hired a new leadership level, like a new ECD, a new head of strategy, a new CEO was coming in, and sort of McGuinness had already left, but sort of Bilben Guy and Trevor were kind of still involved in certain aspects, but taking a step back. But David Bain was still kind of driving it on a strategy level. He's a genius, brilliant man he was. And I kind of came in, and what was great is I came in with an integrated background. At the time the agency was really integrated. Not only was it a nice fresh start, I was coming in with expertise that was adding value to that business. I remember the guy who was actually their CFO at Hyde, who's now I think COO in WPP agency, he was a really good guy. He kind of took me under his wing and brought me in, and I actually made some really good connections, a couple of my BD Network people in. Actually, I really enjoyed it. Honestly, I really enjoyed it. After BD Network, it's one of my favourite agency experiences at B&B. Really, really great agency. But here's the thing, and I was only there a year and a half. And I think, and this is the thing, so there's a little bit, I got a headhunt again. So I come in, and I'd been there, and I got a headhunter came up for me. And it was a headhunt for Jack Morton. And the spec was like, you couldn't have made the spec more on my career and background. It was so spot on. It was like promotional marketing. They were coming from a B2B corporate event world, wanting to expand, looking for international models and areas around it. And, it was actually, salary-wise, it was a big jump up. And, as someone who'd grown up as a, sort of under a single parent and gone into this industry, it was the first time it was a real serious commercial thing. And I kind of knew that it wasn't anything that was going to be, more fun and wearing, but I was like, I probably can't really say no. So I went to the process as a, really open and like with no pressure on myself. And it became pretty clear they really, really wanted me. And yeah, I made that move, and it's a really interesting. I think it was the right move. It is, and long term, I think has been the right move. It's helped me get to it, but yeah, it was a tough one. It's really weird because by the time I said I want to get emotionally attached, I was getting emotionally attached to B&B. And I still think very fondly of B&B and some of the people. I still go in contact, even if it was a short period of time. Yeah. But that was a really interesting time where that was when I think moved from B&B was the last sort of emotional attachment in agency world. But that was a really transitional time, so very different. It was a proper they were a proper network, so IPG. And it was very clear delineation. What I would say is IPG certainly at that time, they were really good as a network. They were really collaborative. There was a lot of interagency work and incentives between sort of McCann, Jack Morton, Weber Shandwick, Frucht, lots of the different agencies together. We were all working together quite collaboratively. Sometimes we put cross agency teams. So I learned a lot about network agencies, but my original hunch of it not being something I would enjoy as much as what I was working on at B&B was right. At B&B I was still working on really interesting campaigns. We did LinkedIn's first ever advertising campaign. We're doing amazing work for Dara Lee. We did some really cool, interesting work. Jack Morton was more of your traditional big agency. Now it's still proud of the work we did. We were doing some really interesting work for the Heineken company, like for Desperados. We did the first ever party in zero gravity and making that experience come to life and building content. That was amazing. So we pitching on that. We won a lot of the Champions League work. I formed the first ever sort of social media division within that area, and I hired someone in to kind of come in and do that. So it was still really interesting. But I could kind of tell that my sensibilities, my personality style, my skill set was more of an agency that independent, or an agency like B&B or BD Network. And actually, which is why, ultimately I ended up at Curb.
Yes, I was going to ask you because it was I feel like those B&B, Jack Morton and Curb, they were all kind of in a bit quick succession,
Yeah.
It was that same kind of period of your working life?
Yeah, it's because and it's really interesting. I think there's a direct relationship from my time at BD and that emotional connection. And I always think if you're getting promoted and going in, you shouldn't be moving. If you're getting your career development, you're working on interesting things, you feel that you're growing, you shouldn't be mowing. But I think also for me, I think I thrive when I am emotionally invested, or I feel part of something I really believe in. I have purpose within it. And I like the agencies that kind of bring, or the companies that bring that out of me. And I think that's really, you kind of work out where is right for you, right? As in your skill sets, your areas, your environment. And with Curb, I met Anthony Ganju, one of the great entrepreneurs of our industry. So he was the founder of Curb, co-founder of Do, the digital out-of-home agency, Visualize, the VR agency, Mesh, the sort of spatial technology, and a whole range of other things. He's a real entrepreneurial guy. And it was another situation that they had just recently sold to CSM, and that he was kind of stepping into a more of a backseat role, and he needed someone to come in and be the managing director of the agency and work through the integration. And Anthony, he's a real technology-driven guy, and that was it. Creative technology was Curbed. They're a really creative agency. They were doing some really interesting, disruptive technology work, but brilliant culture. And we were sharing an office space with Do as well. We had a lot of projects that crossed over because of the relationship between the agencies. So it's a real budgeting, enterprising sort of business. Worked on some really cool stuff. We did this virtual Usain Bolt, which is one of my favourite projects, where Bolt was retiring and we created a virtual Usain Bolt and gave him a final lap of London to say goodbye. Virgin Media was the client. It was awesome, absolutely awesome. Created the virtual Bolt, did the projecting all around London, created an amazing sort of content campaign around it, and that was the heart of Curb, was really going into it. But the thing around that era was we were being more and more integrated into CSM. And CSM at that time was going through, they had a number of agencies or individual brands, and they wanted to kind of bring all the businesses together. And ultimately we were meant to stay as independent as Curb for a lot longer than we did originally, but it basically went into the integration period. So you're right, it was a very compared to where I've been a long period of times, I think I was still looking for something. I was looking for what I wanted to connect with.
Well, I think even early on in someone's career, it is unusual for someone to stay somewhere for 7 years. Like that's a really long extended amount of time. Like you do, if you browse LinkedIn as much as I do, if you spend as much time on there, then you'll see like it's kind of more common for people to spend like at very early on, like a year or 2 years, and then as they become more senior, then those stretches become greater. So it makes sense. It's just that BD Network really like captured you for quite a while, really. Like that was,
it did.
That's the anomaly in all of this, really.
It is, and it is a testament to the agency and the people. Like generally, there was some serious talent, and I think because it wasn't quite as sexy as some of the other agencies that always get talked about, of the great agencies at certain period of times, like your Nakeds, were amazing agencies and important, but people in the know that BD was a very special agency.
So I know during this time as well, I think it was when you became part of the board of directors for the Institute of Promotional Marketing.
Yeah.
So what interested you to become part of the IPM? Like, how did that come about?
So the IPM were quite an important industry body during my formative years. So they would kind of curate a lot of the education, the training, the big awards. They were kind of a voice for the industry. So it was always an important body that we were always interfacing with, and I had done their training courses and done their diploma, and they were quite an important body around it. And I think I do love this industry. I love marketing. I'm passionate about it, and I'm passionate about more people coming into it and promoting it. So the opportunity came up. Well, firstly, I did they did this 30 under 30 thing. And so that was how I kind of first met some of the people, and I was in this 30 under 30 group, which they did, and I met a few of the people. And I remember the guy who was the chairman at the time, Graham Temple, and he invited me to lunch. And what I didn't know at the time is they were basically saying, look, the elections are coming up. I'd done a bit of speaking around this, started doing a bit of public speaking at staff and areas, and he said, we're looking for younger people from the areas, because a lot of the people were people have been there, because it's all voluntary, and if you're a non-exec director, you have to give time, but we're looking for new people to come in, and we think you'd be a really interesting candidate. So I met him, and I met another one of their board directors, and I said, look, we really think, because you have to go in and be nominated and backed, so look, we'd like to back you, and then you get elected, you get voted in by the members, so you have to have a vote, and then you get elected to the position of non-exec director. So that was how it all sort of happened. And I came in, and then I was steering one of the education working groups around it, so something I was quite passionate in. But I do care about this industry, and I think bodies like the IPN and others play a really important role, especially now in terms of providing guidance in a very changing era, but also making sure that the industry is seen as a desirable industry, that people want to come in, and there's the right pathways for learning and development within that as well.
Yeah, it's so important. And so also thinking about diversity as well, like how did that really factor into those like formative years of your career? Like, did you ever felt like anything was holding you back? I know you mentioned that early on institutions were just looking for people from very like an Oxbridge background in terms of who they were hiring, but was there anything else that you noticed?
In the last few years I've been thinking a lot more about diversity and my own experiences within it, and my thoughts around it. And I think first thing to say, when I do think diversity, when you say the word diversity, it's very interesting, because depending on your disposition, you'll have a different kind of reaction to it.
Yeah, it means something different to everyone.
To everyone else.
On their communities and the makeup of themselves.
Yes, and I think that is a really important point, because if you talk about diversity, some people they'll talk immediately about male and female split, and that's what they primarily think diversity is. If you speak to someone who's from more of an ethnic background, then it becomes more about ethnicity and representation of ethnicity. In the advertising agency, you'll also talk about ages and diversity of age groups within it, and in that area. But then you also think, well, this also includes diversity in sexuality and representation. It includes able-bodiedness. It includes neurodiversity. So I think, first and foremost, when I say diversity, I am generally thinking proper diversity. That's how I firstly see diversity.
Yeah, across
diversity.
all of those segments.
All of those segments. And then coming back to my own experience with it, if I'm being... and I guess it's important to say, my background is Middle Eastern and African. So South African, so that's my ethnicity. My family is like United Nations. So not only is the core Azor family is mixed around it, and we've also married and grown into lots of different nationalities. So I'm one of those people that probably can pass from a lot of different backgrounds. I don't necessarily look... I look sometimes paler and darker depending on how the wheatus goes and wherever I go on holiday. They normally talk to me in their local language, thinking about where I am. But
they just take you in as one of their own.
They just take me in as one of their own. Then I open my mouth and then they kind of realise I don't sound exactly like they thought I would have done. So I'm predisposed probably to think more of an ethnicity type of diversity. But then I think back to my career is, if I'm being brutally honest, for at least half, if not more than that, I didn't think about diversity once. And I never thought about it for myself. Because, firstly, I was so driven and determined at every aspect. I never for once, and I was successful with where I needed to get to. I mean, I was building things myself, so in those early phases of setting up the company and everything else, that was what we did. I never really thought about, was I not getting chances because of my name, and my full name is Adam Azor Labibi, is my full longer name. I never thought, is it my name or my background that's ever stopped me getting chances? It never once came, because I was just I was doing everything, I was working so hard around it. And actually to talk about it, I guess, not sure if this calls into diversity or not, but I tell you, coming back to it is, the era I was going into was more the fact that, forget any ethnicity of me, it was more that I was coming from, a relatively modest Southampton background. The only reason I went to university is, thankfully at that time there was good policies and initiatives for, I missed out on the grant era, I'm not quite that old, but it wasn't the same fees, and there was schemes that allowed you to go to university and cost effective, and that was a bigger barrier probably. Yeah, it was that pathway to get the opportunity to, at that time, which is going into academia, which was more of a gateway. That was probably a bigger thing in the early part when I look at it in terms of diversity. I never really thought more. But then as you get a little bit older, and then as you go through your experience, and now as I look back, I do think there was a couple of moments that really stood out to me when I think about diversity. An agency hired an ex-colleague of mine, Indian guy, and he always used to say, like, everyone keeps asking me about their IT, like asking me, genuinely, like, keep saying, oh, I've got a problem with my IT. And it's because there was only one other Indian person in the agency guy, and he was the IT guy. No, it just stuck in my head. Oh, okay, looking around, there isn't a lot of other faces that aren't white. And then another agency, and again, not mentioning the names, it was an agency, one of those those big wonderful buildings where you go into the big foyer and there's loads of floors, lots of different businesses around it, and this agency was on, can't remember what floor it was in. So you go in there's 3 receptionists, a couple of security guards, and you walk into the agency. All the people were black. The 3 receptionists were black, the security guards were black. Say, good morning, how you doing? And I'd go into this agency and walk into this big building, maybe 300-ish, 400 people there. And I was thinking to myself, there is more people down in the reception area who are black, who are not white, than are in this entire agency.
It just makes it stand out to you a bit more when you had that the juxtaposition of the 2 different teams.
And that point, and that was the real thing. I think that from that moment, that was the first time I was starting to open my eyes and realise I am a little bit different here, and I am a little bit more unique in my background. And I think the industry is making, and it has made, good strides in the male and female representation in leadership roles specifically. I think that's something that's good. But if you look around, they're still generally white orientated in regards to that split. If you then look at the splits of the representation of the ethnic groups around it. So I think, there is still a lot of work to be done in the marketing advertising industry in terms of diversity.
Yeah, I feel like there's some agencies that have got really great initiatives and are doing great work in the area, but there's, for every one agency that's doing really well at it, there's another agency doesn't really seem to be on their radar. Like, it doesn't seem to be a top priority, you know.
No, and do you know, I was thinking about this again. Do you know what's really interesting is there's a couple of areas that I think are really good in diversity, complete diversity, male, female, ethnicity, representation of various different areas. And they're primarily social media agencies and digital and technology driven agencies. And this is where I keep coming back to. I think there is a direct relationship, because I would have a hunch that in the technical side, not all of them went to college and university, because they were looking for developers and coders and people with skills that could do that. So the academic area of looking at it is less important. So there's probably an equal playing field, right? And in social, a lot of these people are digital natives, have come up and will have a lot of knowledge about platforms and areas. And again, it's not taught in academic, and they realise in areas. So whether that was by chance or areas, but you take away some of those traditional processes and maybe barriers around, you naturally find more diverse groups in those areas. And I would actually say in the classic sort of ads, events, who actually have a lot of work still to do, they are the ones, because they're still following that pathway. And this is where I come back to, is like, do I think this is a problem just for advertising marketing? No, I do not. I do not think this is a specific. And equally, do I think there is a specific issue in advertising and marketing which is growing? I also don't think. Maybe there's some unconscious bias in certain areas, and there is absolutely some horror stories about some people that I have met, without naming names, that are horrific in this area. But on the whole, especially at the bigger agencies, networks, you don't get that. So then you have to say, well, then why is it? And I think it's too easy to blame marketing, advertising, and you have to start thinking, well, what is the pathway? Why is there more talent that's coming through? So you actually then have to start saying, well, then, there's probably a high propensity of people that are from ethnic minorities that have a lower disposable income, or families with lower means, right? And they are maybe not having the opportunities to go through into university, or they worry about the effect that loans is having, or there's other drivers around it. Maybe there isn't initiatives to go into education, regardless of whether education should be even a major consideration or not. But you have to say, well, then what is the policy? What is the roadmap? What is the education? How are we getting more people into those areas, if that is the natural progression? And if it isn't the natural progression, and it is doing more what social media and what technology, digital agencies have done, and it's coming from all areas, then it is absolutely down for the agencies to make sure they do offer those routes. They do look at their talent roadmaps and where they're bringing in. And I think categorically, whatever, there's a lot of rubbish being talked around at the moment in regards to diversity and everything else. Let me be my categorical is: diverse teams are better. They are more effective. Diversity of thought, diversity of people will lead to a better outcome. I mean, you don't have to be a rocket. If you disagree, you're wrong. It's just ridiculous. That is absolutely categorically true. So if you want to be better as an organisation, as a business, you need to be better at diversity. That is just crystal clear in my mind.
So now you've moved on, and you're currently Executive Vice President at Global Marketing at Sportradar. Can you tell us a bit about your role at Sportradar and what Sportradar do?
Yeah, so first client-side role. So after a history in agencies, it was my first chance to move client-side. And I always thought there was two things that probably I really either wanted to go into. It would either been film or sport. So one of the other accounts I worked in at BD was I worked on Cineworld and View, and I managed to work on Universal, worked on theatricals. I'm a big film fan. I thought it's either film or sport if you're going to focus in. And the opportunity within Sportradar came up, and I joined as Director of Product Marketing. So that was my first role in the company, and it was, fast-moving tech company, never worked in tech. It's always been fascinating me to kind of make that client-side role. And so I went and managed to get the position. And about I came in as Director of Product Marketing. At the time, there was like a marketing leadership. I was hired by the current EVP of Global Marketing, and she oversaw global comms and global marketing. And in the marketing function, you had a Director of Marketing Operations, a Head of Creative Studio, a Head of Events, and a Head of Digital. So I had one of those heads of the department. I came in, and after 3 months, it was a rejig, so the EVP left, and I got put as co-lead with the person who was leading comms, Sandra Lee. So she leads global comms, and they actually put me ahead of the other departments because I was looking after the biggest team, and I took over it. So within 3 months, I come into my first client-side role. You kind of had that bit of that, right, I'm coming from agency, client, is it all kind of working out? No time to set in. And then, came into Sportradar. Within 3 months, I was leading on an interim basis, and that interim basis lasted for a year and a half. And then ultimately, we split the two units. Sandra became, and she's now EVP Global Comms, and I took over marketing, became EVP Global Marketing. So that was my rock and roll entrance into my first client-side role. For anyone who doesn't know, I should probably explain who Sportradar is. So we are the sports technology business, right? If we, over 20 years, if you've been interacting or engaging with sport through technology, you're actually probably doing it through Sportradar. You just don't know it. So whether you're watching sport, the augmented screening, the products, the areas, even the commentators, the notes they're saying, it's one of our products they're reading on. If you're on your iPhone and you're seeing sports results, it's generally our data. If you're making a bet, it's probably our odds or our live data which is facilitating that. We do all the sports performance, like the training, the coaching, scouting type areas, which the actual sports performance and coaches use. We do lots of audio-visual solutions, OTT. We've moved into advertising to have our own DSP, our own programmatic solutions, paid social, and we even do all the integrity side. So the anti-match fixing, monitoring, we're working for leads. So anywhere where there's technology involved, it's one of our products and services. We've been around for 20 plus years.
B2B focused, so you're working with other businesses to supply your products and services rather than consumer facing.
Exactly right. We would describe ourselves as a B2B2C in the fact that we make consumer products, but ultimately they are sold to different businesses across the ecosystem. So tech platforms, broadcasters, bookmakers, individuals, bloggers are even buying our data and technology and solutions around it, so as well as coaches. So exactly to the point. Sometimes you'll be, as a person, interacting with our products or service, but you'll be doing it through that. I mean, even when I always laugh about this when you talk about B2B2C. There's a number of products that are actually B2B2C you don't really realise. So like, I worked for so long in alcohol. Alcohol is B2B2C. If you think about it, you don't buy your beer from Carling. You don't buy your vodka directly from Smirnoff. You buy it from the bar, you buy it from the supermarket, you buy it from online. It's route to market. So that's always the thing which you're creating demand, obviously, but obviously the marketing is different. It's the buying areas around it, and that's similar with FMCG as well, right? A lot of categories are like that. So that was very important for me as well, to take some of my previous learnings, because I primarily worked on consumer businesses, but I'd always worked on businesses that generally had that customer marketing, that B2B component around it, and merging the two. But Sportradar, we IPO'd in 2021 as well. So I was leading marketing during the marketing process of the IPO, and I can tell you, working on IPO
sounds like it would have been a stressful time.
Very stressful time. It is more intense doing an IPO than any marketing campaign you could possibly imagine, and it was in the heart of COVID. So that was another. So we're a sport company. So during the heart of COVID, sport shut down. That was another thing we had to deal with. Like around 2020, bounce back. We strived through that era. We did really well, and then we IPO'd in 2021. Logistics. Forget even the process of doing it, because we IPO'd in the US. We're publicly listed on the Nasdaq. Michael Jordan is an advisor, is a partner of Sportradar. We had to manage just getting everyone into New York. Actually, from the UK, we had to get exemptions from like Homeland Security just for me to travel. You had to go through a huge process, and not just us, a lot of the executives around it, because no one was allowed to travel to the US. It was still heavily restricted at that time. And then actually them facilitating everything with testing. We had to improve the COVID test, getting into the on thing, and then managing that, plus doing the actual IPO. Sandra and the team managing the global comms with all the COVID restrictions around it. But that was a really big milestone for us, and actually for me, it's a really important learning process of what it means to actually the marketing responsibilities as you're going through that process. And now, what does it mean as a public company? I've worked for, done marketing as an agency for most of the companies I work with, a public service aspect, but it's very different when you're responsible for it, you're accountable for it, and that is a very different environment. And we actually did our first Capital Markets Day earlier this year in April, which was 4 years after we IPO'd, and that was almost like another IPO in terms of the whole complexity of what you actually go through. But again, I think this is what I come down, like the learning of that, and that's something that's always driven me in my career, is the ability to take on things and use that to learn and improve. And that's something, again, which I would always say and recommend. It's if you are hungry and driven and desired, there will be opportunities in your career that will pop up. Grab them, put your hand up, take the opportunity. It depends what you're looking for in your career. There's like people who have work-life balances, and it's more important in other areas. But if you are hungry and you are looking to progress and take on, when those opportunities come up, and maybe it's an opportunity that's going to be tricky, you have to go for it.
And what would you say about working client side now, like having had such a long history working agency side? Do you see things now like through a slightly different light? Like how do you really appreciate like the differences in the two different areas and how they come together?
Again, like, so that first I remember speaking to my Corona client before I took the job and say, look, talk to me about it. And he actually said to me, he said, Adam, you've been on the wrong side for far too long anyway. It's about time you should have been a client a long time ago. And it, first and foremost, I think it's a great grounding, having worked agency side to actually then go client side. I actually think you can do both on those areas around it as well. What I would say is you have a very clear view on the agency process because you've been there. You know the exact way of how they've got to that work, and you see through it very, very clear. You see what is real good quality strategy and creative, and you see things that are not. And what it means for me now is I really value the good agency partners, right? Really, really value the ones that are creative or strategic or technical or outstanding in their experiential events execution. We know what's good and what isn't. But equally, when we've done pitches in areas, I'm surprised you see the quality of some of the agencies are really not up to standard of what it used to be. And that's why I see when you see that difference in quality, you really appreciate the ones that actually are good. And this is where I come back to, I think that the landscape isn't at that desirable, urgent, attractive first job that it was 20 years ago. There is a lot of opportunities in all sorts of creative, technical businesses, digital transformation businesses that never existed 20 years ago, that are now more desirable, that are providing some of those entry points. So the talent pool, which was like it was so hungry, people were working all hours and they're trying to do everything, so the quality was so good. You don't get that now. And I think the ones that, there's still great talent, great people, but the agencies that are doing well are the ones that are kind of understanding that and they're building really. And the other thing I'd say, the real determining factor, which I think, and I probably say this is more acutely because my background was always on the account management side, client service is the one area you can really tell the difference now as an agency. And there's some agencies that still do fantastic client service account management, and there's ones that it's so badly fallen off. And that's a really important thing in a relationship is that client side aspect, that real drive, because not just about making things happen, but adding strategic value from that as well.
And when it comes to the briefs that Sportradar that you're putting out there, what type of things are you are you working with agencies on? What type of campaigns are you putting briefs out there for?
Pretty much across the board. So, brand projects, advertising projects, digital projects, events, experiential, international briefs, localization projects. And that's just on the marketing side. And we have, PR and comms agencies around it, content partners. We're lucky because we're a tech company. We have in-house resources. So I do have an in-house design studio. So part of Sportradar, we actually have a sports broadcaster based out in Europe. So we have a lot of audio, visual, motion graphic capability. So we do have the ability around it. But we still work with creative agencies, video production agencies. So there's a lot of briefs. Agency of records. Going back to my point, is we do value agency partners that are doing good work. I feel best relationships are ones that are conductive, you have good trust in good areas, and we do have a lot of agencies of record, but we always also have lots of project-based stuff, and we're always interested to, especially when things are moving as they are now, to make sure we have the right partners around it. But it's a good, healthy roster of partners, and it's good for me to keep my eye on what the industry is looking from the other side. The poacher turned gamekeeper, I guess.
Yeah.
Or reverse.
So earlier on in the summer, you were on stage at MadFest and you were talking about how culture and technology are reshaping sports marketing. What would you say is the key thing people need to know now about those current shifts in sports marketing?
So look, the first thing to say about sports marketing is it's absolutely unique in the fact that we are now in an era where everything is an on-demand, right? So the long days of a TV schedule built campaign is completely vanished with hyper-personalization, fragmentation of media. So sport is one of the last bastions of appointment to view live content. Yeah. Which is scheduled and there, and that is a complete anomaly. Maybe things like Pop Idol is like, there's big moments, there's big cultural things, X Factor, that sort of stuff. That's probably the only other thing that's there, but it's nowhere on the scale of sport. So it plays a really unique role in audience. So that's the first thing to say, is that sport is a very important occasion for marketeers. And the other thing about sport, and this is something which I don't know why this shocked me, this stat, but Theo, do you know what the average age of a sports fan is?
Oh, is it going to be older? Is it going to be like 50?
That's pretty good.
Yeah, well, there we go. I'm in marketing.
There you go. Well, you're very good. It's 47.
Yeah.
47 is the average age of a sports fan. And I don't know why, it kind of surprised me, because your natural inclination is to always think younger, but it's not. You're absolutely right. It's Gen X, right? That's the age. It's 47, and the reason that's important is if you look at all the traditional media channels, particularly TV, everything's in decline over the last 10 years, right? So I think TV ratings UK are about 25% year on year. Sorry, 25% down of what it was 10 years ago. Sport is essentially flat. Sport is like 3% down compared to the 20, because it is still that appointment to view content. And in the US, it's grown over the last few years. So streaming specifically has grown from like 57 million monthly people who were streaming sport once. I think it's now 90. So it's gone up in that area. What that means in terms of sports marketing is, from a brand, you are having the ability through the vehicle of sport to target and market your products and services. And in a very focused area where everything else is hyper fragmented, points of view, you can't really plan those occasions. So that is a very important area. The challenge is, how are you then connecting and leveraging that audience effectively? And this is where sport has this wonderful mixture of what I call art and science, right? The art is the passion. That's why brands have collectively invested billions in sponsoring and activating sport, because they're using that as a connective tissue to an audience that means something, or as a way of mechanism. But the important part is then, how can I deliver that? And this is where I think, when I think about sports marketing, is it's that combination of the art, the passion, with the science, which is the technology. And the really interesting thing at the moment is how technology is enabling interaction at scale and engagement at scale, leading to direct outcomes. And this is where, for Sportradar, marketing is a relatively newer area of our business with the technology we've gone into. But underpinning our technology is ultimately deep data. And this is the key thing is we've been investing quite a bit in the previous years around computer vision. So computer vision is most famous for driverless cars, right? So it's the technology which allows a car to drive. So it's extrapolating data off the camera. Historically, for the last 20 years, how sports data has been coming is by the human eye, right? It's data journalists who watch sport and capture sport and it goes in. That's how sports statistics and data points work. We've been building into computer vision. And what that means is we're no longer limited by the human eye. So we're speaking from the UK. It's just been Wimbledon. I'll give you the example of tennis, right? You imagine you've got Alcaraz and Djokovic, they're playing. Previously, you could only really see who won that rally, how many shots, maybe you can see the speed if you're looking up there, but that's kind of what the human eye can capture and look at. What computer vision can do, it can say, well, what is the angle that Alcaraz is holding that racket at? Now, what speed are they now moving around the court? How is the areas going back and forth? And then in real time, you can look at, well, then how's 20 years of data based on this correlating it? And then what does the weather temperature do to the outcome? And basically what that computer vision is pulling all those depths of data, and in using AI and machine learning, it's essentially crunching that in real time. And it's basically Minority Report style telling you what's going to happen next. Right? So that's what we built. That's one of the foundational pieces of technology at Sportradar. Powers those areas. And the reason I say that is because that depth of data and technology has unlocked storytelling potential, creative opportunities that are untold and then can be distributed on scale directly to the right audiences. And that's what we've really been seeing is how can you take those amazing cultural moments or those encouraging cultural things that are happening in real time and then hit it to an audience en masse exactly right. And everything we've seen, it's not rocket science, it's the principles of marketing, right? Right message, right time, right audience. That's what sport as a vehicle is allowing you to do. So through technology, as a brand or a marketeer, you have the ability, which you've wanted to do for decades, to now do. In real time, if there's a sporting event, let's say you're sponsoring the FA Cup or the Super Bowl, wherever it is, your advertising in real time will update. So we've just done something with NASCAR at the moment. It literally takes the positional data in real time, and in real time it will programmatically distribute it any channel, digital out home, digital online, connected TV, and it will update everything in real time, and you can have areas around it. And the thing is, at the moment you make it more contextual and personalised, we've seen results of way over 100% improvement in CPAs, like click-through rate. It's insane, and it's not rocket science because it's what you've always wanted to do. Right message, right time, right audience. So I think in sport is very uniquely placed. As there is a continued channel and media fragmentation, it's something you can universally hook on and activate and leverage through. But you need to have not only the right sport, the right art, but you need to have the right property and the right technology to deliver against that.
Yeah, it sounds like because of the way that sport is capturing those live audiences, it would have maybe traditionally made it harder when it came to the marketing to make sure that what you're putting out there is the most up to date. You've got that player that's won front and center, but now through being able to leverage like a wider range of data, you're actually going to be able to make sure that everything is very cohesive, like in terms of this has happened real time, so the marketing is going to change real time too.
Exactly right. And it's a really interesting, I think there was a study recently by Magna that looked in to say that people now expect, I think it's like over 75% expect, if something happens, it's like within a week or in 5 days, that needs to then be reflected in the advertising. If it's any later than that, you've not met their expectations. The reality is, we were chatting about this on the panel at MadFest with Ben, and who's from the Baller League, and he gave a good point. He said actually probably the window's 24 hours or a few hours, and he's absolutely right.
Yeah.
Even if the expectation is a week, the reality is you need to activate immediately or as quickly as possible to capitalise on that. The good news is from a success point of view, purchase intent, I think, is increased 23%. So if you are doing it contextual and quick, the outcome is you're driving more sales. And ultimately, that's the effectiveness you're looking for. So again, there is a reward if you can do it, but you need to have the right technology and opportunity to do that. And I think this is the thing. Historically, it was very limited. You need to build really in-house content functions, lots of people doing it. Now, through technology like Sportradar, you can take that and you can activate on it in real time effectively, and that's really the game changer around it. The thing I would say though is when everyone has access to technology, the key thing is how you're going to cut through, and that's where I do think there's going to be a renewal in creativity to make and good strategy and good insight to make sure that you are cutting through when everyone else has the ability to target very effectively.
Yeah, so interesting. And I guess like with there being like a number of developments and advancements within AI and technology and how you're gathering data, like where do you see things going a year from now? Where do you see yourself and Sportradar being in the next year?
So we are going through the most incredible transformation, I think, as an acceleration, not just in marketing, advertising, not just in technology, but in society that we have seen, probably in my lifetime. So where do I hope to be in a year's time? Is still leading the marketing and still leading the charge and growing this amazing company of Sportradar. But I'm going to tell you so. We had our management meeting about a month ago, and I was doing a trends presentation. I usually do like a trends presentation to the wider leadership and say what's going on. Here's the trends, and I decided to do it around audience and how audiences have changed. So I was talking about the impact that Gen Zs and they're having and how they behave differently to millennials and Generation X, etc., and the spending power of them all. And everyone was kind of interested. We got into that, and we went to the practicalities, what that meant, etc. But I had a final slide, and I said, just one more thing. I said it would be remiss of me to give you a presentation about audience and not mention this one thing, because I've talked to you about people, and this is legal, growth, product, all different cross-functional teams are in this area, and said we need to think about, well, what if the next audience isn't people, and our audiences are AI and agents? And I went through all the different areas, and I said, right, so as marketing as an example, I've talked about customer journeys, about how people behave differently and interact. But what if purchases are not being done as a customer journey, but being done by someone's agent? So the AI is doing that customer journey. So if I'm buying a car, normally I would do my research, watch my video, do a test drive, everything else. What if the agent is merging and replacing a big part of that, or buying a new home entertainment system, or whatever the right area around it is? But marketing is the least of the challenges around it. I mean, that's my challenge, but what about from a talent acquisition for our people, right? What if every time we put a role out there, people are using agents to apply for every job around the world, and they're writing that area, and there's a huge increase in volume? What about from legal, when, if you're being open to legal claims in areas, there's an agent that you can write that identifies every potential legal opportunity in every single region of the world and then hits you all at once? What if from an M&A strategy and a growth strategy, we're looking at companies and doing diligence, but these companies shouldn't even be companies because they just become agents? What does that mean from M&A strategy? What does it mean from a talent and a growth strategy? What does it mean when, as a public company, you're not speaking to investors one-on-one as humans, but those investors are AI agents? This is what is coming. This isn't a abstract future looking at 10 years. This is on its path. Now, how and what level these changes come and augment, we don't know yet, and we don't know how it's going to evolve. But be very clear that every aspect in every single function, just advertising, is going to change.
Yeah.
It will. There's no escaping it. You can't fight it. And then from advertising, it is a really important point, because not only are those functions and roles changing, the dynamics of how they service is going to need to change. I mean, we see it at the moment, it's really limited at the moment to creative production, right? I think they're the ones that have been hammered the most, because, for 20 years you would go off and shoot your advert in South Africa and spend 3 weeks, and that's how you built a great piece of content, right? Or you did some area filming. And of course we get into dynamic content, but now some good prompt design, you've got what would cost you £5 million, and anyone can do that for, maybe a few hundred a month as a license fee. So that is changing creative production, but then it's changing with what about the ways of working? What about how the roles between creative and design? I think there's still going to be roles for art directors and copy, or the copy again is being heavily disrupted at the moment. And it's a really interesting dynamic, because if you think about it, agencies' business is still, like a law firm, right? It's a cost plus model, or a rate card driven areas. They look at what their costs are, they put a service cost around it, they then charge that either on a retainer or a project basis. How do you do that when the products and services, the relationship is evolving so quickly? These are the things that agencies need to think about, and how they're going to be remunerated, how they're going to structure, how do they work with clients in a client organisation that's also going through the same challenges about how should they be set up, what are the job roles and talent around it. It's not a doomsday. Do I think that the jobs are all getting? No, of course not. But all the roles are going to evolve, all the roles are going to change, they're going to be augmented by this technology. And what I would say is, trying to put your head in the sand and think it isn't going to happen, you will lose. So the role right now, whether you're client side, whether your agency, is you're not going to know the answer. I'm not going to give you the answer because I don't know it, but I can tell you need to think of the strategy of how you're going to answer that question, and you need to plan for how you're going to evolve to do it. And that is what we are doing right now, right? We, looking at our planning and thinking about how we structure. What does it mean for training? What does it mean for talent? What does it mean for all the different component parts? So that's what I see coming. Do I think in the next 12 months will be dramatic change? No, but I think there's going to be a lot of steps within the 12 months that are probably going to sort of leaving the foundations for the next. It's realistically what's going to happen in the next 3 to 5 years. That's really the real impact I see coming, and it's incredibly exciting. But again, coming back to, I guess, the theme of what we've talked about today, Fayola, is I go back to my example of the Molson Coors and the BD and the IPO at Sportradar. This is one of these moments, right? This isn't a specific moment to an individual, an agency. When you've won a big account, you want to do it. This is an opportunity in the industry. This is an opportunity for absolutely anyone, any level in the entire industry right now. And what I mean by that is, you have an opportunity to make a name, to have an idea within your agency that may become the next USP of your agency. You may have an idea of your own products and service you want to spin off and start up because of your knowledge of the industry. It may change your life at this opportunity. Who knows? Right now is an opportunity for capable, driven people. And what we talked about diversity earlier on, Fayola, remove it. Right? One of the interesting parts right now is a lot of those barriers, a lot of those blockers we talked about do not apply. So if there's anyone right now who has been challenged or struggled or trying to get into it, you know what? Maybe right now is your time. Maybe is the opportunity to really transform without some of those barriers around. And that's one thing I'd really say as a message is, this is your opportunity. This is a chance to build and shape your career or your life and what you want to do. Stay curious, stay hungry, and what a great opportunity to do it. And that's the way I would look at it, right? See this as a real good chance to grow.
Yeah, it sounds like we're in a really pivotal time where there's a lot changing, but it means that there are opportunities out there. You just have to have the right mindset and do the right research, like get in there, don't be afraid of AI and what's coming next, and actually try and think about how you can use it to your benefit and to the benefit of the industry as well.
Absolutely. And the rewards, are exciting, and the potential is exciting. And, the thing I'd say about our wonderful industry, and one of our superpowers is we're great at being agile and reinventing. And I have absolutely no doubt that the industry overall will continue to be agile and reinvent and ultimately get there. The question is what that means needs to be defined. But it is exciting. It is exciting. And generally, I'm someone who generally looks at things in a more of a positive aspect. There will be people who are worried. And it is good, it's healthy to be aware, I would say. But I, again, think about how you can turn anything to a potential advantage.
So looking over the whole sector, is there an issue that concerns you most currently that we need to be addressing as marketers? Like, would that be around AI, or do you think is there anything else that you think everyone really needs to be focusing on and having a think about?
I think AI is almost like a fusion challenge with a few other things thrown in, and it's kind of, you can kind of say whether it's a cause or effect of it. But I think, look, there is no getting away from the fact the world is in a very delicately, finely balanced period at the moment, right? We are having periods of unrest and wars and challenges and conflicts on a scale that probably, I'm not sure if it's just that I'm more aware of it, but I think has certainly been one of the more prevalent areas of my lifetime. I think the consequences of that mean there is a lot of discourse and cultural impact about people and how they feel. Because of the things of those two aspects, there is a lot of strain economically around people around that as well. So whenever that happens, generally it creates moments of uncertainty in the markets and other areas around that as well. Whenever you can bring all these sort of macro trends together, it has a consequence. So if you think about what the advertising marketing industry is, it's a reflection of the industries they service, right? Because ultimately they make their revenues on an agency side through the clients that fund them based on their growth rate and their opportunity. And on a business side, obviously they're going to be going through their own planning and areas around it. And ultimately that is driven by, and AI is almost like supercharging those trends right now. And, that is something that, coming back to as an industry, we need to really think about the consequences of that, right? What does it mean for people? What does it mean for their emotional well-being? What does it mean for their fears? How do you deal with that? People are humans, thankfully, at the moment. We're still in control. The robots aren't there yet. But, that's what I say, is making sure, there is a bit of empathy. I think, one of the things, I think, if you look at history and look at businesses that have been successful, agency being successful, I would always bring it down to still culture, right? And I think there is the classic saying, culture eats strategy for breakfast. I would say try and have a strategic breakfast with a good amount of culture. But there is something to be said about that. And I think, whether that is unlocking your performance culture, whether it's making sure people feel part of a purpose and an area around it, these are the enablers for the technology and for the AI.
Yeah.
This is the real crystal thing around it. So if you're responsible for people, if you're a manager or you want to be a manager, think of your people. Think of how they feel. If you are a leader or an agency head, you are a figurehead. You need to be, someone that people can feel trusted and they feel supportive of you. What does that mean? It means you'll retain the right talent. It means you'll get more out of those people. It means that they'll be more looking to look at those innovations and those developments around it. About the technology, the AI, or whatever else comes next. But, we are going through a very interesting time. And, there's a lot of areas around marketing and advertising and social media that obviously gets a lot of challenges. I assume there's going to be legislation potentially looking at different areas and different regions. We're going through a globalized world that's going more kind of siloed in their approaches and areas around it. I think, marketing isn't going to solve any of those societal problems, but hopefully it can at least make sure the culture is in a good, healthy place. And I think brands, agencies, we all have a role to play in just making sure we look after our people, because our people are the key enablers for everything that comes after that.
Yes, definitely. And just before we end, where is best for people to keep up with what you're up to? Is it like LinkedIn?
Yeah, when it comes to it, I'm most active on LinkedIn. So if you want to see my musings on advertising and marketing and what I think, come find me, Adam Azor, at LinkedIn. I will also give a shout out. What I'm also active on is my better half, Mrs. Azor, and I, we run a foodie blog called Foodie Therapy Official, where we also, if you're interested in sort of Middle Eastern fusion food and good recipes and content around that, that's where I'm also secondly active. So if you want a little break from my musings around marketing and advertising, come find me on Instagram, my wife and I on Instagram, on Foodie Therapy Official. That's where they can also find me.
Yes, I'll have to check that out as well. Thank you, Adam. And thank you for coming on to my podcast.
Thank you for having me, Fayola. It's really great to have this conversation today. It's something I haven't had a chance to really look back in this way before. So yeah, it's great to live and think about some of the years gone past. But say it's not over yet. I still feel that I'm only just beginning.